Hey everybody, what's up? This is Jack with SGCV. Today's video is going to be part 2 in our ESO for Beginners series, Git Good. Last time we discussed the races and their racial passives and benefits and stuff like that. This time we're going to be discussing classes and what they're generally good at. And now I want to say that doesn't mean anything that I say in this is how you have to play. It's just a starting point where you're building an understanding of the game while you're building an understanding of the game and getting an idea of what you might want to do when it comes to group content. It's things like that. The armory system, which is something that will be included in a video, just not this one, has given players the ability to dual spec. So that gives you the wiggle room to play around with different builds and roles. Like I personally have 2 tanks. I have a Magicka DPS and a Stamina DPS, and I'm currently working out a healer build, and a couple other characters that I don't actually have to max level yet. But and one is a hybridized stuff like that. So it's kind of you play around with what you want. Anyhow, I'm gonna try and keep this video as short as possible without glossing over anything I think is important. So we'll go ahead and jump into it. So there are 6 classes in Elder Scrolls Online. You have Dragonknight, Sorcerer, Nightblade, Templar, Warden, and Necromancer. Now, the Warden and Necromancers have historically been the first 4. These Dragonknight, Sorcerer, Nightblade, and Templar have been a part of the base game. Warden and Necromancer have been it's another purchase, kind of like the Imperial race was from the last video. They can be picked up in the upgrade section of the Crown store. Here recently, Morrowind was made part of the base game, so the Warden class came out with Morrowind, its chapter expansion. So it may be a part of the base game now. I'm not 100% positive. I have the most, I have ESO Plus, and I've gotten the most recent. I have all the DLC available. So I don't personally know if Warden is a part of the base game, but anyhow, all of the classes, each of these classes has 3 individual skill trees that are unique to the class, and they're mostly we'll get into it a little more deep, but they're mostly structured as an offensive tree, a defensive tree, and a support tree. I use those terms real loosely with some of the classes, but that's effectively the structure of the classes, specific skill trees. So each skill tree has active abilities, and they also have passive skills that fit in normally with the theme of the skill tree or with something in another skill tree from the class. So I'm going to work my way through the classes in the order that they're shown right here. So first up is Dragonites. Their skill trees are Ardent Flame, Draconic Power, and Earthen Heart. Ardent Flame is their offensive skill tree, Draconic Power is primarily a defensive tree, and Earthen Heart is a support tree. Dragonites make probably the best tanks in the game, in my opinion, but I'm going to say they make very good tanks due to the skills that they already have access to in their own trees, and their resource generation from applying poison and burning status effects. And they bring group support through damage buffs and group shields, and they've got a lot going for them, so they make real good tanks. They have a lot going for them in the realm of what you need to be a tank. Now, I'm going to make videos that also cover the tanking role, the DPS role, or damage dealing role. If you're new and haven't heard it, DPS is what it's called. And then one for the healer role to kind of explain and break down, what they really should be doing, because I've personally and Spy as well have run a lot of content, like group content, where the roles are getting kind of muddled. So anyway, so back to the Dragonknight. There's a lot with this most recent chapter, High Isle, coming out in the patch, and the chapter itself. There's a lot of like DK's got nerf speculation out there with this new chapter. I think it's a terrible opinion. I have a Dragonknight. I do more than tank with it. I do tank, but I do other stuff with it as well. I don't personally notice a difference. I know there is a difference, like mathematically speaking, but it's not, you know, it's not, they didn't get nerfed like all the crap and back. So you shouldn't be pressing keys and or buttons, you know, depending on console or PC, but you shouldn't just be like key slamming aimlessly. But that was true before this chapter, and it's true on every class. So that makes for really terrible like resource management. So good races for tanking are stamina based. It's really any stamina based class or race. I mean, the best ones I would say for tanking specifically though are Imperial and Nord. Dragonites do also make good damage dealers. They make good DPS. They're pretty versatile as far as area of effect and single target damage goes. Their biggest like push that they bring to damage dealing is damage over time pressure. Poison and flame damage are their like high points specifically, and they actually have a passive that gives them a 5% damage bonus with those two particular types of damage. So flame damage and poison damage, damage over time effects, things like that, they Dragonites really flourish there. Magicka Dragonites are primarily flame based damage, so it's optimal, you know, and it's for a Magicka Dragonknight, it's optimal to have a Magicka based race like a Breton or a High Elf. Stamina Dragonites are going to be primarily poison damage, and stamina, any kind of build, character build, is optimal to have a stamina based race like Redguard, Orc. There's a lot of hybridization that's been, you know, slowly releasing. That being said, Dark Elf, Khajiit, things that balance stats more in their racial passives are, you know, it's not bad. With more advanced builds, you know, you'll want to use certain skill morphs that don't necessarily fit your main resource, but we'll get into that in another video. I am going to talk about that a little bit in this one, but we'll dive deeper into it into another video. So overall, the Dragonknight, when it comes to being beginner friendly, I think the Dragonknight tank is beginner friendly. I think DPS Dragonknight is not as much. There's a good range of play in the skill levels, skill cap, you know, skill needed to play a Dragonknight. There's a range that's, you know, it's low skill entry. They make really good tanks. It's really hard to mess up as a Dragonknight tank, but they have a lot of range in skill and output potential. So the DPS part of it is a little more, you know, that's a little different. All right, so next up is Sorcerer. So Sorcerers, their skill trees are Dark Magic, Daedric Summoning, and Storm Calling. Dark Magic focuses on offense and support. Daedric Summoning focuses on summons, offense, and defense, and then Storm Calling focuses on offense and defense. The simplest role to fill with a Sorcerer is DPS. just by using. So you get 2 summon pets as abilities, and then 3 if you want to make the argument that that one of their ultimates is technically a pet, and that's true. But you can have 2 pets out at all time. Just by using those 2 pets, you pass out passive damage just from the pets. So Sorcs do have plenty of area of effect and splash damage at their disposal, but single target is really where they shine the brightest, depending on which, I guess, depends. I'm going to say this, that depends on the resource that you spec into. Sorcerers have a physical and shock damage buff in their passive abilities. They get a 5% damage buff to shock damage and a 5% damage buff to physical damage. So you can have a Magicka sorcerer or a stamina-based sorcerer, which I know sounds, sounds funny, like a barbarian sorcerer, but stamina sorcerers, so to my point from just a second ago, stamina sorcerers, in my experience, are more equipped for area of effect damage, where Magicka Sorcs are just really high-end single target damage. Not to say that they can't pull off area of effect, but they're just, either one carries a lot of strong personal buffs, one of which actually heals with critical strikes, so they're also survivable. The next role that I'm going to say that they're good at filling is going to piss somebody off, and I honestly don't care, because one of my tanks is a sorcerer, so I'm alright with that. Sorcerers make decent tanks. They have a good amount of survivability skills and defensive skills. Every class has access to skills that taunt and skills that mimic the Dragonknight's ability to crowd control, which is part of tanking in this game, which I will get into. The race choices, as far as racial choices here, it's the same principle. Magicka based for Magicka sorcerers, stamina based races for stamina sorcerers. The choices that you're really making at that point is, do you want easier resource management, like a Breton that adds Magicka recovery, or a Redguard that recovers so much stamina every so often, or do you want more damage? So, and again, you can opt for a race that's in between, then has balanced stats. Overall, I'm going to say Sorcerer is beginner friendly. Damage is easy. You can do a great job just by being a pet Sorc. Tanking isn't actually that hard either with a Sorc, but you will have to go outside of their skill trees to get some of the skills that you're going to want for that. Sorcerer has a low demand for skill to play well, but it has a really high skill cap for players who want to continue to improve their personal gameplay. So this is that real wide range. You can be an effective sorcerer and just be, brand new. You can be an extremely effective sorcerer in combat, in content, and have been playing for a while. There's just such a range. So next up, we have Nightblade. Their skill trees are Assassination, Shadow, and Siphoning. Assassination, as you can probably guess, is focused on offense. Shadow is focused on offensive ability and stealthy gameplay, and Siphoning is focused on resource draining, offensive abilities, and support. So Nightblade is a class that is decent at all 3 roles: tanking, damaging, and healing. I know I haven't covered a class that makes a good healer yet, but Nightblade is one of them. Which I know it's got, it's likely sounds odd if you're completely new to this. Something that's meant to be a sneaky roguelike class actually makes a good healer. There are several effective builds out there, which includes the one that we have out that Spy runs, and spoiler alert, there's an update coming to that, but they make really decent healers as well. They also, Nightblades actually make for very good PvP experience as well, if you like the roguish playstyle. Um, just like the two classes covered already, you can build effective stamina and magic-based Nightblades. I have one that I'm working with currently. It's not the traditional like sneaky playstyle though. Again, racial, like when it comes to choosing a race, stamina-based builds, stamina races, magic-based builds, magic races. As for, so overall, as for is this a beginner-friendly class, Nightblades are similar to Sorcerers in that they have a low skill requirement for entry. Which what I mean really is you can be effective as a Nightblade and be brand new to the game. They have a high skill cap for maximum output potential though. So something like a full-on stealth bomber, right? That takes a lot of like understanding of how the skills like synergize, what you've taken, what gear sets you have, things like that. They can do a whole lot of damage. They can be real effective. So this is another class that gives you a wide, it gives you, if you play this class, you have a lot of room to develop and continue to get better with it and improve. All right. Next up is the Templar, and we'll get there. The Templar skill trees are Adric Spear, Dawn's Wrath, and Restoring Light. Adric Spear focuses on offensive abilities, Dawn's Wrath focuses on damage and support, and Restoring Light focuses primarily on healing. When you hear Templar, I want you to think Paladin or Cleric. This class is the old school battle-hardened warrior of light. The class, honestly, in my opinion, is a bit broken. Even after, this is another class touched by the recent chapter. A lot of players are saying that there were nerfs, to specific skills in the class that just, I don't know, they seem discouraged with it. I think it's still broken. And I say that because of the blatant utility at your disposal pretty much at all times. Just in their own skill trees, you can build a Templar with almost strictly Templar abilities, which is not something that you can say for most of these 6 classes. I mean, I guess the skill did get nerfed. It got changed, is what happened. And it's not a completely dead skill. But anyway, something I'm going to mention here because it really does apply to the Templar pretty heavily. So once skills are leveled up, they have different morphs that you can choose, and some of them tend to be magic or stamina. The different morphs of the Templar's abilities have notably different uses or notably different effects, which almost forces a different play style. However, magic or stamina, either one is very effective. This class is, honestly, it's good at all 3 roles. Damage output is simple. You can do a lot of damage with literally 1 skill, 1 button press. Tanking is really easy. You do have to go outside their skill lines for certain crowd control abilities. And then last, you have healing. It's real easy to heal with the Templar. It's almost like they were made for it. Healing is easy to just radiate it especially if you build right. I mean, there's an entire tree dedicated to healing in this class. So, again, when it comes to races, stamina races for a stamina-based build, magic races for magic-based builds, and as your skill progresses, you can start to kind of venture out. And this is just a recommendation. Don't take it as gospel. As your skill progresses in the game, you can venture out into the more balanced stat races. It just happens to be simpler to lean into what your plan is. So if you plan to have a Magicka Templar, you want a Magicka race, and then at that point decide sustainability is what I want in my race, or damage is what I want in my race. So as far as is the Templar beginner friendly, 100%, this is probably the most beginner-friendly class. If you have a Magicka Templar, you have access to damage that is also self-healing, sustainability of your resources, increased armor rating. It's everything you need. Stamina Templars over Magicka Templars, Stamina Templars are, in comparison to Magicka Templars, a Stamina one, they're not really that much more difficult to play. You just have to put a little more thought into some aspects. You may want like the healing from damage. You'll likely end up with less Templar class abilities, but Templars are like, if you're just getting started in this game, play Templar, play Magicka Templar, because it's going to have everything that you need to stay alive and learn while you play. And Templars do real well in PvP as well, especially for a beginner-friendly class like they are, which I've mentioned it a couple of times now. I'm going to cover PvP in its own video due to the differences between PvP and PvE content. They do not function the same. Your point, like the goal that you need to be working toward, is not the same. The way that you set up is not the same. So that'll get its own video. Now, before I cover the next two classes, I'm going to say this. I want to make these 2 points. I don't think that they get the accolades that they deserve, but I will say that I do believe there is a higher skill requirement, in my opinion, which I'll explain as I go through the ability trees and things. So, anyway, all right. First up of these two, we have the Warden. Their skill trees are Animal Companions, Green Balance, and Winter's Embrace. The Animal Companions skill tree is focused on pets, damage, and sustainability. The Green Balance skill tree focuses on healing and some support buffs. And then last, Winter's Embrace focuses on a mixture of offensive and defensive abilities. The Warden, this is the Druid. You have animal summons, nature-based healing and support, nature-based defense and offense. This is the Druid class. Like if you're if you've played other games where they have them, or if you're just an old head, and you remember the older games, this is your Druid. That's what this is. The sad part, which is not, I'm going to say it, and it's not going to come out until you've played the game. Unless you've played the game, you're not going to understand what I'm saying, probably. The sad part about that is when a Warden's in the group, you know it, but playing the class feels like, to me anyhow, it lacks a bit of an identity. They even get brought along in higher end trial groups for very specific reasons because of some of the buffs that they bring with them. It just doesn't feel like as a Dragonknight, it's got a very specific feel to it. Sorcerers have very specific playstyle feels. Nightblade, that's a rogue. Templar, you're a paladin, or the equivalent of a paladin. This should be the equivalent of a druid. I don't know what happened in the development of this class or what exactly, but it just doesn't seem to feel like it has as strong of an identity as the other classes do. So I also mentioned higher skill to entry. I say that because to fully utilize this class, you almost have to have a dynamic playstyle, dynamic ability rotation, which ability rotation and stuff like that, like structuring ability setups, I'm going to explain in a video of its own. But Wardens have a lot of great abilities in their own personal skill trees. Ones that stack damaging, like damage pressure. Frost, I think, is highly underrated in this game. It's a lot of control. um, and you can do some, funny things with it to get the full benefit. You have to manage what you're doing in this class more so than you do in the first 4. Wardens have skill timers that are 3 seconds on some of their skills, which is a lot, it's shorter than normal. It's shorter than most, I'll say that. I'd say normal's not normal for a Warden is 3 seconds, but like most skills have much longer timers. I say much longer, like we're talking about, 6 seconds, 10 seconds, things like that. They're also a class where it makes sense to take a morph of an ability that doesn't use your main resource if you really want to push for the full potential. So, Spy's main is a stamina warden, and when we go into dungeons and he brings the warden, he melts enemies with it. But it didn't get there anywhere near as easily as other classes could have and honestly do. That being said, wardens are often rated at the lower end of damage dealers, which is the low amount of praise that I mentioned. Spy's warden is in content is a force to be reckoned with, and I mean, people can look at it and think what they want to think about it, but I've run with it enough. It melts stuff. Like when we go into a dungeon, if he's playing the warden, we're completing the dungeon. That's going to happen. Wardens also make excellent tanks. The frost and defensive abilities they have make a really good unique use of crowd control in a way that other classes don't. Which I know I said they feel like they don't have an identity, and it's just not. I don't know if it's just not coherent enough or whatever, but like I have a warden that I'm working on. I don't know what it is. I just felt like it needed to be said. Race suggestions are the same here as before in the beginning. Stick to the plan. Like if you want a stamina build, get a stamina class, or get a stamina based race, not class. If you want a magicka build, get a magicka based race. Adapt as your skill improves. You can race change, or you can start a new character. Like you can build essentially however many characters you want, because armory system. But as for is the warden beginner friendly, I gotta say it's not as it's not as beginner friendly as the previous classes. Linking together the abilities and figuring out a playstyle is much more difficult here. It is rewarding though. And then finally, we have the class that I am picking for my next character, Necromancer. Their skill trees are Gravelord, Bone Tyrant, and Living Death. Gravelord is focused on offense, Bone Tyrant is focused on defense, and Living Death is focused on healing and support. The Necromancer class is another class that has some uniqueness to it that comes from how abilities link together. This class definitely has a unique identity, but it does require a much more managed playstyle. You can't just pop into being the Lord of the Undead. You just can't. It takes a little more skill and thoughtfulness in your setup. So, Necromancers make good tanks, damage dealers, and healers. I've seen them in all those roles. I've played with them in I've played in content with a Necromancer in each of those roles, and they do well. Spy has a DPS Necromancer. He does very well. It's very consistent damage. It's not like a large ramp up time. They have an ultimate ability that literally just raises everyone in the party that's dead all at once. That's a very unique skill. The difficulty comes from skill timing for the best outcome or the best potential. I say this mainly in relation to damage dealing, which is what almost everyone wants to do in the beginning when they first start. There's a good amount of potential If you can figure it out though, and it's consistent once you have it figured out and you have it in full swing. My race recommendations again are it's, you know, I keep saying this, but it's the best way to think about it. If you're going to be a Magicka build, pick a Magicka based race. If you're going to be a stamina build, pick a stamina based race, and then from there look at it from what you think is going to be your preference. Do you want easier resource management? And when I say resource, I'm talking about Magicka and stamina, because that's how you use your abilities. They cost Magicka or they cost stamina. Do you want easier resource management and sustainability, or do you want more raw damage? Because that's how the races are primarily split up. So as for beginner friendly, our Necromancer's beginner friendly. I'm placing this in the same spot as the Warden. It's probably better to start with one of the first 4 classes that we talked about, and then later on try out a Necromancer once you have some baseline skill in the game and you have, you know, an understanding of how to make skills and abilities, passives and active abilities, like synergize with, you know, and pick gear sets and stuff like that like play into what you want to do. So anyhow, those are all the classes. Those are the 6 classes in the Elder Scrolls Online. I wanted to do that, but I wanted to go over the actual, you know, give a little more information than what this little text right here does. Masters, you know, Necromancer, Masters of Death. Necromancers can call upon corpses to serve as undead thralls and weave ghastly spells to both harm and heal. All right, but like, what is a Necromancer good at? You know, it's not real helpful from that aspect. So I thought I would make a video for everybody. If you're brand new, now you have a good idea of what each of these classes are about, and at this point you also have a good idea about what each of the races are about. Elder Scrolls Online, you know, as I mentioned before, has a play your way slogan. That is true, but there are certain ways to set yourself up for success with what race and class you pick to pair together. And I say that coming from a perspective where I am someone who believes meta or best in slot in this game is bullshit. It gets pushed a lot on the player base, and then everybody in the whole game, like every player you run into is running like, you know, the same set, or they're running the same like build, they're running whatever, you know. And ESO is much more like an old school experience with basic mechanics that will get you killed if not done in a good amount of its content. So it's just not, I want to try to make it as clear as possible for beginners and remind some of the players, honestly, like, and I don't mean that in an insulting manner. I've just seen it a lot here recently. I want to make it clear to beginners and remind some seasoned players that, look, the ESO's different. It's not WoW, it's not Final Fantasy, it's not some of the other MMOs that have been around. You know, it's ESO is very unique. Like, you can basically do whatever you want. If you put enough thought into it, you can build however you want to build. It's like, you may get punished for it for a while until you have it figured out. You can play. Like, damage is not king in this game. The hardest dungeon in the game, or I don't know if I consider it the hardest dungeon in the game anymore, but what was considered the hardest dungeon, like 4-man group content dungeon that you just queue into, March of Sacrifices, is a very mechanic heavy. There's a lot of one shots. You know, it's you can't out damage that dungeon. You just can't. There's things that have to be done or you're gonna die. So anyhow, this is just part 2 of what's going to be an entire series that will have you prepared or refreshed if you're a returning player. I that I've shed some light and help give you some information to help you maybe form an idea of what may sound fun to play to you, because that's really the important part here, is play a way that's appealing to you. The rest, I promise you can manage to figure out. They have that slogan, play your way, for a reason. I just want to lend some experienced opinion, I guess, and provide some information that's not provided here, on the screen, because none of these say anything. I mean, they give you a very in general overview of the class. They don't really tell you, hey, what's this going to be good at? Like, you might start playing it and not like it. Hopefully now you have a little bit better of an idea. Anyhow, that's it for the video. If you liked it, please like and share the video, and if you haven't subscribed already, we would love to have you. Click that subscribe button and make sure you click the bell icon. That way notifications are turned on, so that way you get notified whenever we drop new content, either in this series, and we put out plenty of other content too. There's a couple of ways I also want to take a second and point out. There's a couple of ways to support the channel if you feel inclined to do so. We have Spy Pie Gaming t-shirts available for sale. I'll link it up in the top corner of the video. There are also, down below all of our videos, there is a thanks button. If you don't want to buy a shirt, you can donate. You can click that thanks button and donate just a couple of dollars. Every little bit counts and helps us keep this going. It's something we enjoy very much. We've gotten to engage with a lot of players. As a matter of fact, just yesterday we were helping somebody test out their PvP healer build, and it's not somebody that we've ever actually met. They just in game recognized us, and we were helping them test it out by dueling. So it's been a lot of fun. This journey on this channel has been a lot of fun, so we want to keep it rolling. And if you guys, every little bit that y'all in the audience that is watching the content helps us with is much appreciated. So anyhow, that's me being long-winded, and that's everything I have. I will see you guys in the next video.